No, maybe so. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to jump in. I want to get through the PowerPointy stuff as soon as possible so we can just jump in and get building. Hopefully everybody has Blender installed. Hopefully everybody has Unreal installed. It'll just save us, like I said, tons of time on the back end. Pardon me. So thanks everybody for coming out and for jumping in and having fun with us doing some game art this evening. Just a little quick overview. We'll get our feet wet. We'll build the asset. We'll talk about texturing, and then we'll get into Unreal. So who am I? What are my favorite pizza toppings? Well, my name is Mike Hayes. I've got a background in game development. I started in games in, I want to say like 2002 in the QA department. One thing about game development is it's all about kind of networking and, you know, making sure that you surround yourself with good people. One of the people that actually helped me get in there is in the chat this evening. Just a tip of the hat to James. He's one of the guys that helped me kind of get my foothold in the industry. So I started off working as an artist on the Need for Speed franchise, and I spent a decade plus working on cars and all sorts of cool stuff for them. Then I moved over and worked on, was arguably my favorite game to work on, Sleeping Dogs. It was like GTA but Hong Kong and even more violent. And then I constantly have to apologize to people for this game. Battlefield Hardline, lots of good people worked on it. Wasn't the best game, but hey, I digress. Worked with some really great people. Okay, so today what I want to do is I want to look at just creating an asset for a game, taking it from the rough concept to completion, and then hopefully getting it dumped into Unreal and kind of playing with it inside of the space. Okay. So the goal here is to have a little bit of fun. For me personally, I find even when I'm sitting around watching Netflix, I'll be noodling either inside of Unreal or inside of Blender or inside of Substance Painter, doing art stuffs. I find myself doing art as much as possible. Anybody here have any experience making any sort of 3D assets? Okay, we got one. Okay, a few people. Now, if you do, that's great. If you don't, it's also great. You don't have to, have a degree in this already to play along. Anybody play Stray? Okay. Stray is a very beautiful game, very fun game. Lots of mods that support putting your own cats in. Some people have modded their own dogs in. The dog doesn't work as well because they're not as dexterous, but that's fine. All right, so in games, life tends to move really fast. New software comes out constantly. Old software gets booted to the curb constantly. And AI has come along and kind of changed the game. Already, a whole bunch of the tools that I've been using for years and years and years have integrated some sort of machine learning, some sort of large language models, whether it's for texture generation or like Photoshop's AI tools for like just image manipulation and removing things from backgrounds has really gotten more and more advanced. Today I'm going to be using some software. Can anybody name, a piece of software that you generally use for creating 2D art? Pardon me. Yeah, Photoshop, Illustrator, right? Procreate, Clip Studio Paint. There's tons. MS Paint. Okay. Anybody have any? Krita. Anybody have some 3D modeling software? Oh, A-Sprite. That's a good one too. Yeah, you got Maya. You got 3ds Max, Blender, Fusion 360. Like there's all these things like Rhino. many pieces of software. Today I'm going to be using Blender. For one, it's readily available. Everybody can just grab it and download it. For two, I've got more and more industry friends that have transitioned from their primary piece of software being Maya to their primary piece of software being Blender, it's kind of kicking in the door of the industry, and it's actually making Maya work harder to be better, which is awesome, because I've complained about a lot of things about Maya over the years, and Maya is having to rise up to meet the challenge of this new contender. Okay. There's also Houdini. So again, we'll be using Blender today. For one, everybody can have it. For two, it's a very much a go-to thing. If you're a super Maya stan or you're a noob, don't worry. Once you know how to use one piece of 3D software in the industry, you can pretty much move across within like a day or two. You're just learning shortcuts. Now, even if you don't plan on being an artist within the industry, every bit of knowledge is relevant. If you're a level designer, knowing content creation tools is probably pretty useful. If you're a programmer, you might have to know content creation tools because you might be interfacing between the two. You might be writing bridges that go between Blender or Maya and Unreal or Unity. Other than the content creation side, talk about game engines. So other than Unreal, any other game engines that people know about? Unity, for sure. Godot. Godot's been blowing up a little bit thanks to Unity had some missteps there. There's RPG Maker. Yeah, there's a couple others. There's stuff for like visual novels. There's tons of game engines out there. So I'm going to be using Unreal today. I could use Unity. I personally don't care for it as much as I like Unreal. I like Unreal because it's very artist-centric. Unity is very good if you are more code-centric and you like C#. But Unreal is C++ Blueprint, and I'm a Blueprint kid. All right, so UE has a long and storied history. They were a game developer. They made an engine. And occasionally they kick out a hit game every once in a while. Fortnite, for any of the people who've never heard of it. Unreal is also used in lots of stuff like architecture and advertising and film. And I'm just here to tell you that like real time is kicking indoors, right? Like we're taking over the movie industry, TV, VFX. Unity is not a bad engine. It's good. It is a slightly less storied history. They were built from the ground up as an engine dev, and they don't have a lot of game dev experience. And I feel like that does hold them back a little bit. If you think Unity is ugly or less pretty than Unreal, you just need to dig in, right? You can make it as pretty. Unreal gets pretty by default, and Unity you have to turn on all the tweaks. Here's a couple other engines. Frostbite over here. I've worked in Frostbite quite a bit. It's okay. It's gotten better over the years. Source, if you've played a lot of Valve stuff, CryEngine, and then Lumberyard. So there's lots of other stuff out there. There's little guys and big guys. EA clung on to Frostbite. They've kind of moved past it. But engines are just places where we build games, right? They're not as consequential for us as the artist. The goal here is really to just pick what's right for your game or your production, what you're planning to build. If you're making a mobile game and you've got a team of a few people, Unity is probably the game engine for you because you can quickly stand up your game really fast. All right, so we've talked and talked, or I've talked and talked, and you guys have been great. I've gone through the spiel. And to pay you guys back, what I want to do is I want to do some stuff. I want to build our asset. And part of that is getting it into the pipeline, right? So now hopefully you're all grabbing that arcade zip off of Google Drive. Once you got that downloaded and cracked open, just open up the zip, dump a folder somewhere, and there should be a blend file in there. Now, here's the real question. How many folks have ever touched Blender before? Okay. If you haven't touched Blender before, it's okay. If you've never touched it before, it'll take a little bit of getting used to, but it's not too bad. If you've been a Maya user for years, if you were picking up Blender pre-Blender 2.8, it would be a nightmare. Ask me how I know, right? I used Blender pre 2.8 and abandoned it within an hour. I was like, nope, too different, doesn't feel good. I moved on. But ever since they've started making a lot of quality of life improvements, it's gotten really good really fast. So what we're going to do is you're going to take that file off the internet. We're going to jump into Blender. Okay, so you want to open up the arcade blend file that's in that folder, and once you open it up, you should see something that looks reminiscent to this. You've got a 3D viewport. Your background might not be pink like mine. I changed my background to bright pink as opposed to just boring gray because the default model color is gray, and so if my background is also boring gray, it's quite difficult to make out some of the shapes and forms sometimes. So I just changed my background color a bit. All right, let me actually just launch Show Off. I've got this little tool that makes my life really easy. There we are. Okay, just one sec here. Just need to move this out of the way. Show Off. There you are. Okay, so this little guy right here is going to let you know what button I'm pressing and when. So you can see left mouse button, right mouse button, middle click, okay? Pardon me. So in Blender, I'm just going to go over the base controls really quick to get us up and running. Middle mouse click and drag is going to orbit the camera. Okay, mouse wheel zooms in and out. Okay, if you're middle mousing plus shift, you can pan around. So middle mouse click and drag, middle mouse shift and drag, and then mouse wheel to zoom in and out. Okay, so that should be your basics. If you've got something selected, so you click on something and you want to focus it, like let's say your camera's over here and you're like, oh crap, like now when I move around my camera doesn't feel good. Click on the thing that you want to focus on and click on your delete key or your period key on your numpad. If you're one of the cool kids and you've got one of those 60% keyboards, you're going to have an awful time in Blender or 3D in general because 100% keyboard is choice because it's got all of these mappings for it. So again, if I hit the period key, that's going to center this object. Now here I've already set up some reference planes. Again, if you've the hotkey for the 3D window. So what do you mean by hotkey for the 3D window? Oh yeah, so to zoom in and out is just your mouse scroll wheel, and then it's just middle mouse for everything else. Middle mouse and shift. Okay. Now, if you don't want to use your mouse wheel to zoom in and out, you can also hold Control and middle mouse. Blender lets you. You should be able to. If you can't select these, I may have made it so that you can't select the background objects for references. Don't worry about that yet. I did that so that people can't accidentally delete the references. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an object, throw it in, and get modeling really quickly here. So in order to create in Blender, you hit Shift and A, and that's going to bring up your add. Shift A, and there's all kinds of things we can add. Force fields, that's a bit weird, that's for physics stuff. Speakers, cameras, I don't really care about any of this stuff. Up at the top, however, we've got meshes. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit Shift A, and I want to create a cube. Okay, I'll click on cube. Now when you click on cube, don't click off, because what you're going to get here is the creation menu. If you clicked off, one of the things that's not super awesome is once you've clicked off, okay, I'll just, up here, there's this little arrow. If you click on this, it expands to show you all the thingies. But once you click off of the cube, you lose that menu. So what I'll do is I'll just create a new one. Shift A, create a cube. Okay, now under the add cube, you got a whole bunch of different things. You got your location, right? We can move it around. We've got our rotations, and we've also got our size. I'm just gonna set this all back to 0, but I wanna set our cube to be probably about 1 meter, okay? So it defaults to 2, I just wanna set it down to 1. It doesn't really matter because we're gonna modify it really quick. I just thought that this is a really useful menu. When you're creating anything, you can go in here and you can manipulate it. Okay, so once we've got our cube, and I'm just kind of zooming around, again, I'll select the cube. Okay, and over here, you can see there's this folder. Actually, I think I'm in a slightly different version of the file to you guys. Let me just make sure I'm in the right exact version. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to click on the build here over on this side. And then I'll hit Shift A, create the cube. If you find yourself unable to select the cube, it probably got dumped in here. And if you're having trouble, this little arrow here, if you click on that, that's going to enable you to click on everything. So you can now accidentally move all your references and stuff. That's why I turned off that little arrow. Pardon me. All right, now Shift A, put in a 1 meter cube. And what I want to do is I want to go into the front view. Now there's some keyboard shortcuts. If you don't know the keyboard shortcuts, you can always click on the compass rose over here. So I want to go and click on -Y, which is going to be our front view. And it's going to snap into a nice orthographic view. Now I want to line this up to kind of line up with this. Now, one of the things that's going to help us quite a bit is there is this button up here which turns on X-ray mode. If you look, it gives you the shortcut key Alt-Z. So I'm just going to hit Alt-Z, and that's going to give us this kind of see-through version of our cube. And what that's going to let me do is it's going to let me kind of like scale it and squish it and move it so that it fits in our reference. Now, is everybody okay up until and including this point? Okay. So again, I'll go back out here for a sec. So I'm going to create a cube, make sure it's 1 meter. I'll click on this little -Y, go into the front view. I'm going to make sure that my X-ray is turned on, and I'm going to hit the S key for scale. So if you've used Maya before, they use W for move, E for rotate, and R for scale. I don't like that. In Blender, it's S to scale. So I'm just going to scale this down until the sides. Okay, so until the sides match up with the black parts. There we go. Now, in the front view, I've got my width pretty good. What I want to do now is I want to jump over to one of my side views and take a look and see how we're doing. One of the most important things when you're working in 3D is to not just work in one view the whole time. If you've ever done any character art and you've like done an amazing looking character in just the front view, and then you rotate it and you just get the horror show because everything's like really flat or stretched. So now I could try and manually manipulate this and rotate around, but I'm going to hit the -X, and that's going to dump us over into our side view. I'll drag our handles. Now, in case you don't have your handles visible, go up in here to the gizmos and make sure that you turn on your move tools. It should be by default with the file that I've set up, but just in case you get lost, this is where you turn on your move. Okay, now right here, what I'm going to do is I want to scale this in, but only in one axis now. If I scale, it's going to scale the whole thing. But if I scale and then hit Y, so we have 3 axes in 3D. We've got the X, the Y, and the Z. I'm isolating the Y axis, which is front and back, to manipulate the actual depth of the thing. So I'm just going to hit SY and scale this in a little bit. Okay. And so now we're getting kind of our basic shape for our little arcade unit here. Okay. Now, depending on, comfort levels, some people could just like duplicate the cube, move it up, duplicate the cube, move it up, etc. We're gonna, just model it like we'd be modeling it. So up until this point, we've been using moving, rotating, scaling, that sort of stuff. But now we actually need to get in and do some editing. Actually, what I will do is maybe scale it up a little bit more in the Z. So S to scale, Z for height. Just to where that kind of like angle starts, like that. Okay. So now I've scaled this up. One thing to remember with Blender, much like Maya, if you've used Maya before, you need to freeze your transforms and delete history and stuff like that. For the side view, like I said, just click on the negative X. You can, if you kind of walk through your number keyboard, as you're hitting the different keys, it takes you through each of the different views. But it's easier to navigate sometimes just by clicking on the actual side view compass. Okay. So, like I said, you might need to freeze transforms or delete history. What I'm going to do is I'm going to apply my scale. So I'm going to hit Control A, and I'm going to apply scale. And what this does is it stops my scale from getting all wonky and funky as we go. I'll show you more about that in a little bit. Okay. So I've applied my scale. I've got my rectangle. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Tab. So Tab gets you into what's known as edit mode. And again, if you have some background in 3D, in edit mode you can select 3 different types of things. You can select a face, you can select an edge, oops, or you can select a vertex, which is a point in space. In Blender, you have the 1 key is going to let you select vertices, the 2 key is going to let you select edges, and the 3 key is going to let you select faces. Okay. So faces are the big flat things. Edges are the lines that are part of flat things. Oh. Press the number 1, the background disappeared. Yeah. So if stuff disappears, for example over here, just like Photoshop, you can hit your little eyeballs and bring them back. So if anything goes amiss, you can always get it back. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Tab, go into Edit Mode. I'm going to select a face, which is on the top. And what I want to do is I want to extrude the face. I want to make new geometry. So I'm going to go into my side view again, and I'm going to hit E to extrude, and just pull that up to about here. So again, I'm just going to undo that. I'm going to select my mesh, hit Tab. I'm going to select on the top face, again in edit mode. I'll hit E to extrude and pull it up. Now here's the secret. You can pull it up this much, you can pull it up this much. It doesn't matter. We're going to tweak it in a minute anyway. So you don't have to worry about things being perfect. One of the things I enjoy doing as a teacher is breaking perfectionists. They want to like get everything like super duper pixel perfect. and I tell them never bother with pixel perfect, because in games we only ever get anything to maybe about 80-85% completion anyway. Okay, so I've got my X-ray on, I've got my face selected, and I've pulled it up to the right height in the side view. The next thing we're going to do is, if we look in the front view, this looks fine. If we look in the side view, we can tell that something's not right. I could try doing this and scaling, and then moving this and scaling, but that's really not worth our time. It's going to be a lot faster, and again, make sure you've got X-ray turned on, to just select these vertices here and just pull them back. This will allow you to be a little bit more exact. Okay, allow you to be a little bit more exact, and you won't have to kind of mess around with the whole, scaling stuff, right? So again, I'm just going to undo. So we've got our extrusion pulled up. I'm going to select the two vertices on the front, and then in our side view, I'm just going to pull that back until it just about lines up. Now again, do not worry about being pixel perfect. It won't matter. It won't matter about anything. Okay. So now we've got our basic shape. What I want to do next is we're going to extrude up another little section. So I'll grab this side. I'll hit E to extrude. I'll pull that up. Now again, I'm probably going to want to go in my front view here. I'm just going to pull it up to the top of the black part, like so-ish. And again, don't worry about being perfect, because it doesn't matter. Okay, now this has got some lovely round corners. Don't worry too much. We're going to fix that in a second. Okay, so up until now, I've been extruding up. Oh, what's up, Henry? Oh, Henry's having a scritch on the rug behind me. He's my dog. Okay, so we've played with faces. We've manipulated a vertex or two. Now I want to use edges. So I'm going to select the edge on this side and select on the edge on this side. So hold Shift, select both. And what we're going to do is we're going to create that nice round bevel that's on here. So I'm going to hit Control and B and just pull out. Okay. And it doesn't matter how much you do either. So if I do it a little bit and I stop, don't worry. If I do it way too much and stop, don't worry. As long as you leave this menu up here, you're golden. Because what we can do is we can push that further or less. So you find a spot where you're kind of happy. And then what we do is we increase the number of segments. Okay. Now, depending on how kind of high density or high end the project is that you're working on, you could add more segments, you could add less segments. I'm going to say 0.9, and let's say I add 5 segments, whatever. What I could do is make this slightly less. There we go, 0.8 with 5 segments. Looks lovely. Okay. Now, I'm going to say that's fine for now. There's some ugly shading on here. Don't worry about it for now. Okay, so this is our main sort of black part for right now. Let's add a couple of little bits to it. Okay, so I'm just going to check in. Everybody's doing okay. I don't want to get, like, don't want to leave people in the dust on stuff. Okay, I'm just going to undo and redo this a little bit. So Control B to bevel. I'll set it to about 0.08. I'll set it to maybe like 4 or 5 segments. Okay. Now, there's a couple of things about an arcade machine. They generally have a marquee across the top, and they've got a screen, and they've got some speakers. For right now, let's address the marquee first. So for the marquee, I'm just going to select the face on the front. Okay. I'm going to turn on our X-ray so we can see what's going on here. Yeah, the Maya shortcut keys are they're hard, like grained into my brain from using Maya forever. And here's a weird thing. I started my career in 3ds Max. Then I was punted onto Maya by EA. They're just like, nope, we're using Maya. And I was like, meh. And then when I discovered Blender, Blender is like a free version of 3ds Max. It has the modifier stack. It has all the same sort of things that Max had. So it's kind of like coming home. All right, so I'm going to select this face, go into our front view, turn on X-ray mode. 3ds Max and Maya, they weren't even related. So Autodesk bought, I can't remember if Autodesk bought Maya or Autodesk bought Max. I can't remember who they owned originally, but they were two competitors that were bought by the same company. So they're not related, but they've been stealing parts off of one another for years. All right. And it's also weird to me that they own the two top competing pieces of software. It's very strange. Okay, so we've got this piece selected. We're in our front view. I'm going to hit I to inset. And I'm just going to scale this down, inset, 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 until, yeah, definitely big Adobe energy. So I inset this in so that it kind of fits with our reference image. So number one rule of creating anything in 3D is work from reference. Unless you're a concept artist. If you're a concept artist, go ham, right? You can just do whatever you want and then just blame it on the fact that it's a concept. Okay, so I hit I and then just drag my mouse until it kind of lines up with the reference. Okay, so now we've got our marquee. Now, if you want to add a little bit more flair to it and a little bit more realism, we would hit E to extrude, to push this in just a little bit, give it a little bit more life and detail, and then maybe scale it a little bit. So just hit S. Okay. Just going to scale it in the height a little bit, and then scale it out in the width a little bit. There we go. Now, that's not entirely necessary. It's just going to look a little bit more interesting. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to repeat this process for the screen. So I'm going to go into my front view, click on the -Y, turn on our X-ray, which is Alt-Z, and I'm going to hit I to inset. Now, this one's going to be a bit weird. I want you to go all the way. It's more important to kind of like hit the height than it is to hit the width. So I'm just going to go a little bit further, like so, and then hit SX to scale out in the X. Now, the reason for that is this is on a slope, and if we were to scale in Z by world coordinate, then some funky things happen. So that's why it's more important to hit the height when you're insetting and less important to hit the other part. So again, I'm just going to go in here, hit I to inset, get as close to the height as I can, scale it in X until we get the width, and that'll do. Okay. Now again, just like up here, if I want to add a little bit more visual interest, I'll extrude it in just a little bit. And then I'll scale it just a little bit. Okay, and that's just going to provide us with something that looks a little bit more interesting. Now here's something that you can play with. Be careful. When we're dealing with moving stuff, there's different spaces or coordinates. So right now my orientation is set to global. If I click on normal, you can see that my arrows change. What that's doing is I can now move this object based on the surface direction as opposed to the world direction. So now I can just grab this and kind of move it like that, right? This also helps with scaling. If I want to scale in the X now or the Y now, oops, for the Z now. Oh, actually, hold on. Is my scale global? Hold on, let's go normal. Normal. There we go. So I'm just going to set that a little bit. So again, just be careful with that because you can forget and end up doing really weird things. Okay, so now we've got our lovely screen. To put the speakers on, I'll do that in a minute. For now, this is kind of everything we need for the base cabinet. When you're to this point, you can select your object, right-click, and go Shade Auto Smooth, and you'll see that it'll get rid of all those harsh edges. And what that's doing is it's going to apply a smoothing up to about 30-degree angle. So you get this nice transition on smaller things, and you get a harsh transition on harsher angles. Okay. Hopefully everybody's okay. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to come over here into our outliner. I'm going to click on the cube, double click, and I'm just going to call this cabinet. I'm going to turn off the eyeball to hide it because we've done the big part, the main part. What I want to do next is going to be a little weird, so you're going to have to follow me on this one. I'm going to go in our top view, and in the top view, just going to move to where we can see this piece here. This is going to be our shape that we're going to use to extrude this white surround here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Shift A to create, and instead of a cube this time, I'm just going to create a plane. So a plane is just a flat surface. By default, it's 2 meters. I don't really care. You can leave it at 2 meters because we're going to edit it. Okay, so in my top view, I'll turn on, how can we move the intersect square on the steep face? Okay, hold on one sec. Okay, so let's say we wanted to move this whole thing, like this whole thing, but according to the surface. So what we could do is I could set the orientation to normals, all right, and then we could slide this along the surface normal. If you want to quickly do something like this, let's say you just have one particular edge. If you hit Shift V, what that does is it locks the edge to moving along existing edges, so it won't modify the overall surface. But for something like this, if you were trying to move this whole thing, I would say you change your orientation to normal, and then it will just move in that axis, and so it'll slide across that surface. All right, so I've got this big piece. I'm going to turn on X-ray. I'm just going to grab this thing and move it something like that. Actually, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to undo, leave it at center. I'm going to drag it using the Y direction arrow. I'm going to leave that along the center line, and I'll show you why that's a cheat in a minute. I'm going to go and enter edit mode by hitting tab, and then I'll scale the whole thing down in edit mode, move it over in edit mode. The reason it's important to do this in edit mode is we're leaving the pivot point of the object in center. Again, that will become important later. Okay, so now we've got this object. I'm in edit mode. I'm going to scale this all the way down until it's only as wide as that. I'll scale it in Y until it takes up most of this. Okay, now I have a couple of things that we can do here. We could add some cuts, or we could do some extrusions. It doesn't really matter which one we do. So what I'll do is I'm just going to use the loop cut tool over here. So if we just click over here, I'm just going to click on loop cut, I'm going to click on the top edge, and where it says number of cuts, I'm going to put 2. Okay. So again, I'll undo that. I'm going to zoom in. So I'm going to click on loop cut, or Control R. I'm going to click on the top edge, set it to 2. And the reason I'm doing that is now I can grab the top and bottom vertices or the top and bottom edge and hit S for scale and Y, or sorry, X, there we go, like so. And I'm just trying to get that almost like the Legend of Zelda rupee shape. There we go. Okay. So now this is just so that we can extrude this shape up and over. I'm going to go back into my side view once I've got this. So again, once you've created this sort of shape, doesn't have to be perfect, again, I'll go back in my side view. I'm going to drag this over to here-ish. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect because we'll fix it in a minute. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select our faces, and in side view I'm going to hit E to extrude and pull that all the way up. And if it doesn't line up right away, who cares? I'll just edit by hitting tab, line it up real nice. Okay, so now we can see our nice vertical part, like so. Okay, I'm just going to grab those 3 faces again, and in our side view, extrude all the way up, drag it back. Okay, now it's going to get a little tricky coming up. I'm going to hit extrude. I don't need to bring it all the way up. This time, I'm only going to go up to where it starts to curve. Okay. So now we've got this really cool shape, and we're up to where it's going to curve. Now, we could try and kind of make it janky. We could try and like extrude and rotate, extrude and rotate, extrude and rotate. I'm way too lazy for that. I'm going to use, just the work smarter, not harder thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate these faces, move them up, extrude them across, and then we're going to connect everything after. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my front view. I'm going to hit Shift and D to duplicate, and that will rip those faces off and duplicate them. So you should see I've got my copy up here. So again, grab those 3, hit Shift D to duplicate. Now I'm in the front view, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit R to rotate, and I'm just going to type in 90 while I'm rotating. 90. And what that's going to do is it's going to give me a perfect right angle rotation. So let me just delete those and do that one more time. I'm going to select these faces, hit Shift D, move it up. In my front view, I'll hit R90 to rotate it 90. And then what I'll do is I will move this about there. Okay. And then I'm going to hit E to extrude. And it only really needs to go to about the middle point. I don't really care about anything after there. Now, this has given us a really nice empty spot where there's this set of faces and this set of faces. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these faces on either side, and I'm going to right click, and I want to use what's known as bridging. So if we bridge the faces, it's going to connect them. It's not going to connect them very nicely. That's because we haven't inserted a number of cuts yet. I'm going to say 5 cuts. Now, right here, we've got blend path, we've got blend surface, and we've got linear. I'm going to leave it on blend path. And then where it says smoothness, just going to smooth this out until it's just about perfect. Now it won't be perfect, but it'll be close to perfect, and that's good enough. Okay, now I'm going to undo that. Okay, so we've got a surface here and a surface here. I'll right click, bridge my faces. I'm going to increase the number of cuts. Now I'm going to use 5 because I used 5 in the other space, so it'll just be easier to blend. Where this was 1, I'm going to reduce it down. I think it was like 0.57 kind of worked for my particular profile there. Okay. Now, the reason that I wanted to leave this right here on the center line is because I'm going to show you a quick, just using a modifier. Okay, so over here, the modifiers panel, I'm just going to click add modifier, generate mirror. Okay, now because this was left in the center of the grid, it works. If you have something that looks a little bit like this, don't panic. If your thing looks like this or something else because it wasn't left on the center of the grid, with your object selected, just go Object, Set Origin to 3D Cursor. And what that'll do is it'll set it right back to the center of the world. Okay. Now one thing that I want to do is I'm just going to turn this off for a sec. I'm going to delete these 3 faces. Okay, now this is where I'm just going to add Shade Auto Smooth. So now we've got this nice mirror modifier on there. If I bring back the cabinet now, we've got the black inner part, we've got the white outer part. I'm just going to call this Trim. I'll put that in with the cabinet. Okay, so that's looking pretty nice. Here, tell you what. I think I'm going to move this whole thing a little bit that way. There we go. That looks better. Okay, so I'm happy with these for right now. I'm going to hide them. I'm going to quickly make the control deck and the leftover pieces, and then we'll work on getting them into Unreal in a minute. Okay, now for the control deck, it's just a cube. So we'll go create cube. Again, it doesn't really matter what the size is, because I'm just going to scale it. So I'm going to scale it way down. Now, here, so I scaled it as an object, which gives me funky scales. If I undo that, I go into Edit and then scale it way down. My object scale stays okay, which is much preferable. So sometimes, if you remember, just go into Edit first. Okay, so I scaled it way down. Then I'll scale it wide in X, like so-ish. Okay, go into my side view, scale out in the Y. Okay, and then if something doesn't quite line up, we'll use 1 to select vertice. Okay, something like that. Now, the pivot point here is in the wrong spot. Doesn't matter. We're going to merge it onto other stuff, so I'm not bothered. If you are bothered, a little bit over-attentive, go Object, Set Object, or Origin, 3D Cursor, or you can set it to the center of mass, and it'll put it in the middle of the object. Okay. Now, I've got this thing. If we go in the top view, so we've got this graphic in the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select face on the top. I'm going to hit I to inset to about there. maybe scale that a little bit. There we go. Okay, so I just wanted to do that so that the graphic has somewhere to be. Again, if you wanted to, you could extrude it down ever so slightly, scale it ever so slightly, it doesn't really matter. Okay. Now, if we want our stuff to look a little nicer, these really hard, nasty edges are not super awesome. I'm going to click on Generate under our modifiers. So this little wrench over here, and I'm going to put a bevel on everything. So edge beveling makes everything nicer and less kind of jank. So I just increase the amount to 0.2 and the segments to 2. It still looks a little rough, but that's because we haven't right-clicked and auto-smoothed it yet. Now, by default, this auto-smooth is set to 30 degrees, which still gives that sharp edge. If you want to get rid of that, you can crank this angle up to like 50, 60 degrees, and all of a sudden, you're going to get that nice, soft edge. Now, this might not be hyper-realistic, but when you put it inside of a game engine, that little bit of added curvature really does allow the light to play off it a little bit better. Okay, so now I'm just going to rename this to controls. Dump that in there. So now we've got all of our stuff. The only thing we need are the speaker grills and then the joysticks and the buttons. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is, now that we've got all these pieces, I want to kind of get them together. So I'm going to select, hold shift, select all the things. I'm going to select the cabinet last because I want the cabinet to be what the whole combined object is. With all the things selected, so again, click, select, shift, select, hit Control A, and we're going to apply all of the visual geometry, so all the like little modifiers and things are going to get applied on. And then I'm going to hit Control A one more, or sorry, Control J is going to merge them all together into cabinet. So now this is one piece. Okay. Okay, now I want to quickly make some buttons and the speaker grills. We're running a little short on time, so what I'll do is I'm going to hit Shift A, I'm going to create a cylinder. Okay, so it's got 32 sides. It's really big, so I'm going to say 0.1, 0.1. Okay, even that's kind of big, but it's fine, because we're just going to change it up. I'm going to hide the cabinet for a minute, and I'm going to go into my top view, and I'm just going to make a button real quick. So scale. Okay, that looks about right for the button in the side, or sorry, the top. And then where's my piece? Okay, so now I'm going to go here, scale in the Z for height. About that. Okay, so now it's kind of small. I'm going to apply this scale. So Control A, apply scale. Get out of this. Now, I want my button to have that nice rounded top, just like arcade buttons do. So what you can do is you can select the top face. And if I just hit the 2 key to convert to edges, it selects all those edges, and I can hit Control B to bevel and just drag that out to give us a nice soft button. Now you might not need 5 divisions because buttons are really small. Okay, so that looks good. And because it's in games, I'm just going to delete the bottom face because no one will ever see it. Okay. Now the top thing, I'm not too bothered about. It's fine. If I wanted to, you can select that face, right-click, poke face. This will put a vertex in the center. And what that lets me do is make that concave button top. There's 2 different kind of like buttons for arcade games. There was like the dome top, and then there's the concave one. You don't have to do either. I just have a preference. Okay, and then I'll right-click, shade smooth. That one looks a little wonky, so I'm going to go in here, There we go. Just increase that a little bit. Okay, now what I'm going to do is in my top view, I'm just going to make the buttons real quick. Now to make them real quick, I'm just going to hit Shift D to duplicate them. So let's scale that down just a hair. Shift D to duplicate. And now I've got them selected. I'll hit Shift D. Shift D, and then when you're moving them, if you hit the X key, you can actually constrain them to just moving in X, like so. So again, you hit Shift D to duplicate whatever you've got selected. You hit the X key to constrain them moving left and right. And then once I've got them all, I can select all of these cylinders, hit Shift D, hit X, move them all over, like so. So now I've got all those buttons. And if I want to make the little guys up here, Shift D, move that over, Shift D. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to make a button instead of a joystick, because the joystick's just going to take us a few extra minutes, and I mean, it's the same basic principles. So it'll look like this. I'm going to select all of these, bring back our cabinet, and go in the side view. And you can see that it just needs to be rotated a little bit. I think it's like around 5 degrees or 4 degrees. Yeah. Okay, so just rotate them just a little bit. Okay. Are they? Yeah. Now they're sticking in, which is perfect. Means that there's no leaks. Okay, so we've got our buttons, we've got all of our good stuff. One more thing I want to do is I want these speaker grills. Well, one thing I can do is I can duplicate one of these, move it up. Now it's already been rotated a little bit, 4 degrees. So if I go in the side view, rotate it 86 degrees. That's up and down. And let's scale this thing so that it's the same size as the speaker grill. Okay. And then if we go in the side view, I'm just going to try and rotate it until it kind of matches this angle. Doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, and once you're happy, Shift D, move it over until we're on there. Okay, now this is going to be one of those, here, hold on, let's rotate X. I'm going to use the normal, where are we here? So if I select everything and go by the normal, I can then push it into the surface a little bit more. There we go. Okay. Now, that's good for right now. I'm going to select all the bits and bobs. Okay, and then select the cabinet, and then hit Control J. And that's just going to merge all that stuff into one object. Now, before we get into Unreal, everybody make sure that you've opened the Unreal project, because it's going to take a few minutes maybe to compile stuff depending on your system. So make sure to open the Unreal project while we're working on the last bits of the Blender part. So at this point, we've made a basic asset. One of the things I want to do is I want to apply some materials to it. I've already built some of these materials inside of Unreal, so we can just assign them when we get in there, but we have to assign them to our model first. So with all the things selected, Control J to merge. Once you've got them all together, come down here to click on the little material icon. Now by default, this cabinet doesn't have any materials on it. If I go into our Unreal project, this cabinet has a bunch of materials on it. Okay, So we're going to need at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a whole bunch of materials, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the plus, let's say like 4 times or 5 times just to start. And this will give us different slots, right? So in slot 1, there's no materials. Why are there no materials? All right, so in slot 1, there's no materials. I'm going to click new, and I'm going to call this arcade black. And I'm just going to make this black. Now, if I come up here in Blender and I click on our viewport shading preview, it'll show you that the whole thing is now black because I've created this material. I'll click on the second one, click new, I'll call this arcade white. And now there's nothing assigned to that, so we've got to go back into our edit mode, just hit tab. Okay, and what I'll do is I'm going to select some faces. Now if you want to select all connected things, this is a really good shortcut. If you select or hover over one of the things you want to select and you hit L, this is for like all connected. Oh, I ran into one issue I can see already. So I've got this here where we've got some overlap. It's not the end of the world. If I hit the 1 key, and I'm just going to select all the vertices here with X-ray turned on. So I'm selecting all the vertices by hitting 1, grabbing those. If you turn this little character on, this auto merges vertices, and we're going to hit scale X and just scale those in, and that will merge all those together in the middle. So that'll take care of that issue. Okay, so again, I want to select all of these faces, select arcade white, assign, I'll turn that white. Okay, I'll select all these faces, select arcade white, hit assign, and that takes care of those parts. Okay, so I want to create one new material called marquee. Now you can assign whatever color you want to this because it's not going to be that in the game. So I'm going to select the face for the marquee. Selecting connected faces is just the L key. And in fact, if you see select linked, you can actually select by material, by normal, by seams, by UVs. It's really useful. So I'm going to select this face here for the marquee and assign it. I'll select this face here, create a new one, call it screen, hit assign, give it its own color. Okay. Okay, and then there's the control deck, which is right here. We can add a new one, call this controls, hit assign, give it a color. Doesn't matter, right? And you could give it, you know, individual colors for the buttons, whatever. I'm not too concerned about that right now. Once we've got a couple of materials assigned, okay, let's see here. So we've got the black, the white, the marquee, the screen, and the control deck. The last thing we'll touch on just briefly before we jump over into Unreal is we're going to need to just for a moment look at a UV. Now, if you haven't done UVing before, don't worry, we're not really going to do a lot of UVing, but we do need these couple of pieces UV'd, and the rest is fine. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the face for the marquee. And inside of Blender, up until this point, we've been working in layout mode. I want you to just click onto UV editing, and you'll see we've got something in there. So if you just click and drag, there's something, and the UVs are not properly laid out for that. So I'm just going to select everything that's in here, right click, unwrap. Okay. So the unwrap doesn't look great. It looks like it's laid on its side. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select everything, move it, Oh, I'm going to turn off this snapping that's up here. I'm going to rotate it -90. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale it to fit. Okay, so just scale in X and scale in Y until it fits. Does it fit perfectly? Don't care. Okay. If we're looking in here, we've got something akin to this. We're just taking up all of the available space. I want it to fit inside. Now, I'm just going to do the same thing for the screen. I'll select the screen. I'll select everything that's in here. I'll right click and go unwrap. It's going to do something funky. Now, what I want to do is I want to figure out which part of the screen is showing up. So if I want to check that, I can click on this little button up here which says UV sync selection. And what I can do then is I can click up here and it should show me on here where it's being selected. This is really stretched and warpy, so I'm going to do is up here where it says marquee, I'm just going to click on the X to get rid of that, so we get like a rectangle, or sorry, a square instead. So what this is showing me is that this square, if this is like really chaotic and too much for you, just hit Shift H. It'll hide everything except for what you're working on at the time. Makes your life way easier. Okay, so this is obviously needs to be rotated -90. Oops. -90. And then again, I'm going to scale it a little bit in X, scale it in Y until it fits somewhere inside the square. Doesn't have to be perfect. Once you're done with hiding stuff, hit Alt H. We'll bring it all back. And again, for the control deck, this is the last thing we'll do, and then we'll jump over to Unreal. I'm going to select this, hit Shift H to hide everything else. Right click, unwrap. Okay, and again, I think this is going to need to be rotated -90. I'm just going to move it over. It's just using the G key. If you don't have the controls visible, just use G to move. Okay, and scale Y. So SY, SX, there we go. So just scaled things to kind of fit nicely in there. Now it doesn't have to be perfect because we're just going to throw this inside of Unreal. I'm not going to worry about UV unwrapping the rest of it because the materials that I've made are world space materials, so they don't really need the UVs. So again, I'm just going to double check. I'm going to select the marquee, hit Shift H. So we're in here. That looks okay. It's going to fit inside the space. Shift H, hold the screen. Now if you want to be like really anal retentive, I can turn on the snapping to grid. I could select by vertex and I could literally snap to the corners. It's not really going to get us anything extra for this particular version. Now, if you wanted to take this further, you want to model more, if you've got a bit more experience, you know, I've modeled stuff like putting the coin door on the front, modeling the speaker grills a bit more, modeling the back access panels, that sort of stuff. But for right now, I think we're in good enough shape. I'm going to hit save. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I want to export this. I want to send this out to Unreal. So I'm just going to go File, Export, FBX, and I'm going to find our workshop. So wherever you've unzipped your folder, whether that's on your desktop or wherever, what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw this into some folder. It doesn't matter really where. And then we'll get it into our game. Okay, so I'm just going to put this right here. When I'm exporting, I only want to export the selected objects. I don't want like the reference planes or other bits and pieces to come with it. So just export selected objects. Where it says geometry, under smoothing, I want faces to have smoothing on them. And everything else, just leave it exactly as is. And you can call this whatever you want. You can call it arcade machine, call it whatever, and hit export FBX. So again, we did file, export, FBX, found whatever folder you want to throw it in. Make sure you're exporting just the selected object and hit export. Okay, and then I will find, we go into here and go into here. Okay. So I now have the arcade machine file. I'm going to open my Unreal project. So by now, hopefully everybody's got their Unreal project and it's open. So in the Unreal project, I've made it pretty simple. There's literally a thing that says place your prop here. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to find that file, the FBX file, and inside of the project, let me just find our little edge here. Come on. There we go. Inside the file, we have a thing for meshes. I've already got one arcade in there, but I'm going to bring in the next arcade cabinet. Okay. So when you drag this into Unreal, inside here, it's going to give you import options. Where it says materials, I'm going to say do not create materials because there's already materials in here. I'll click import all. Okay, it might give you, some shading things. Don't worry about it, it's fine. I'm going to hit clear. I'm going to hit Control S to save, and we can dump our object in. Okay, now this one looks to be just a little bit small, but that's okay. Okay, I'm now going to select these things and delete them because now our prop is in here. Now again, once you've gone in here, selected your object, file, export FBX, selected objects by face, create your FBX file. It's just a matter of dragging and dropping it into the Unreal folders. Okay, now this might be a little bit small, so what I'll do is over here in the scale, I'll click on the lock and I'll say, hey, maybe make it 1.25 times the size. There we go. Now all the little squiggly parts, those are the parts that are not UV'd nicely. The ones that are more uniform, they're the ones with UVs on them. I've gone and kind of done us a solid. If we go into the materials folder, okay, so inside of here, let's say I've got a black matte material. I'm going to click and drag that over here onto that. When I scroll down, let's see here, there should be a marquee. So if I scroll down to where it says marquee, I click and drag that onto our marquee. There we go. And then if I scroll a little bit further down, we should have one that says trailer or screen. Where's the screen? Where's the actual screen? That's the marquee one. What material's on here? Hold on one sec. I'm gonna cheat. Marquee, control deck, screen player video mat. Oh, that's what it is. Okay, so there's a bit of a cheat. If you go into movies, or no, it should be under materials. I'll just search for screen. There it is, screen player video mat. So if you click and drag that onto there, that's going to put the material on there. And then I just need a white material, cabinet white. And then let's put the control deck on there. So control, there it is, control deck. All right, so now we have our materials on there. If you want to like one up it a little bit more, even without putting UVs on and without putting some more pizzazz on here, I've actually cheated for you. If you type in coin, so, oh wait a minute, hold on. Is that the decal? It should be a decal, yeah. So if I click coin, I click and drag this in, it's gonna look really weird. Okay, that looks really, really weird for right now. However, we're just going to hit R, scale this way down. Okay, hold on a sec here. So this thing that I've just brought in, if I just type in, here, let's go 0.05s, there we go. So it just needs to be rotated. So I'll hit E to rotate. Okay, and then I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees that way. Okay. Is that facing the right way? I can never tell. Yeah, it is. Okay. So what I've done here is I've just created a decal that projects onto the surface. So you can just literally push that decal onto there and it will give us the coin door, and it will get you that like glowy material on there. And so this is going to allow us to have fairly polished looking assets with, you know, not a ton of effort. Once you've gotten that in, we've got a bunch of mats and stuff in here that you can have a play with. So I've created some basic materials, I've created some more advanced materials, I've got some decals in here. We've got like the chevrons, which if you put them on weird things, they do weird stuff. Okay. We've got some decals for like dirt. There's different like panel decals. So again, these things, I don't know why they come in so crazy huge, but if I come in here and I rotate the decal and then I scale it down, we can make, you know, like vents and things like that for, okay, that's way too small. There we go. I don't want a negative in my scale, thank you. There we go. Okay. So I'll scale you down a little bit and then move you over. And so now I've got a little vent on the front of my arcade or whatever. So you can have a play with those. So one of the cool things about sharing this project is that, you know, you can take this away and have a play with it and see what's going on. I'm going to hit Control S or save on my project now that we've got this brand new thing in here that we've just built together. So over the last couple of days I've put together this little preview. It's actually a remake of part of the second floor of the school, and if you hit the play button pardon me, and I'm just going to hit F11 to maximize. So I've tossed this character in here. So this is where you're entering from. You walk into the second floor of the campus. Welcome to the workshop. Over here, this is actually one of the classrooms. You can see we're building our arcade machine together. Okay. Over here we've got our offices and things like that, and some more classrooms. There happens to be some stuff left by some students. Some nice headphones that are a physics object, and I don't know where they went because I just hit them. Okay, and here's our arcade machines, and they've got their little arcade graphic playing. Okay, and we've got our skateboard, which is also a physics asset, which I just sent to the moon. And over here, if you've got any more questions or you want info about the programs, you know, with us at Kwantlen or Entertainment Arts, Liam.Bagshaw at KPU, he's the guy to contact. This is another one of the classrooms where I teach. And then down here, there's more hallway and more display case and more fun stuff down there. There's also some physics cubes to play with. Over here, you can see I was drawing. Got a couple of little pieces of concept art over there. Got a water bottle, some cans. Okay. So yeah, all of the stuff that we're doing tonight, like they're basic modeling concepts, but it's literally just going through that pipeline, right? Like moving from taking a piece of concept art, doing a model, getting it into the game, And you know, like if you get it in engine as quickly as possible, you can see whether or not things are reading. For example, when I imported this, my scale factor was off by about 1.25%, right? So it was about 25% too small. But all that put together, we start fleshing out the area, right? When I started this and we just had the arcade cabinet, this space was really boring, and I didn't want us to come in here into this spot because here, let's admit, I didn't want us to come into this spot here with just an arcade cabinet. So I started adding stuff and adding stuff and adding stuff, right up to the point where like this skateboard came together like today, because I was like, you know what, I just want to put more stuff. I want to put in, you know, hats and little bits and bobs and posters to make it feel more like the actual campus, because just modeling a boring prop it's okay, but it's nowhere near as fun as having, you know, a little bit of a toy to play with. And having toys to play with is kind of part of being in game design, being game development in general. Okay, now hopefully up until this point everybody's been able to follow along. If at any point, you know, you got lost, this is going to be recorded, it's going to be uploaded, everybody will have access to it. You've all got access to the files, which is, you know, it's the big takeaway. You know, your Blender license is not going to expire, your Unreal license is not going to expire. So all of this stuff is going to be available to you guys. You can take it apart, you can, you know, pick it apart and figure out what works and what doesn't. Pardon me. One of the big things for me as a learner is just like repetition, right? Just taking something, breaking it apart, and just figuring out what makes it tick. Here, let me just go into the classroom. Okay, there we go. Okay. So I want to kind of leave some space here for a little bit of Q&A. If you guys have any questions, concerns, if there's something specific where you're like, hey, you know, I'm trying to model X and I can't figure out, you know, how, or if you have like games industry stuff or school stuff, now is a perfect time to do a little bit of Q&A there. Anybody? I see some familiar faces. I'll bop back over here while I'm waiting for some questions. So this one here, like I said, I've got my modeled coin door. I've got, you know, the joysticks and stuff. Got back panels. One of the best things in Unreal is like the decal system. For, you know, all of my students, I've shown them the importance of mesh decals and stuff like that, because they can make a world's worth of difference for almost no cost. Let's go defaults. There we go. Select that. So, for example, I can take this decal, and I know it doesn't need a coin door, but I can put the coin door into the floor. Doink. Here we go. So now we got the carpet that has a coin door in it for some strange reason. Check for edges that don't register as non-manifold. Faces more than 4 sides, loose geometry, that sort of stuff. Okay, so if you, like most devs, if you have some weird geo and stuff like that and you're trying to track it down, Blender has a very weird thing for finding that stuff. Where is it? Okay, I'm going to go into our preferences, into our add-ons. There it is, the 3D print toolbox. This is really weird, but the 3D printing toolbox, this is actually really awesome. Where is it? No, that's landscape. Here's my 3D printing toolbox. Turn off, turn on. How come you're not showing up? That's very strange. There is a 3D print toolbox, and I'm trying to... okay, here we are. So it's under Edit. I think... No, you're not what I'm looking for. Negative. Where did you go? That's very strange. It's supposed to show up. So hold on. 3D printing toolbox. Oh, maybe it needs an update. That would be odd. There it is, 3D print. Okay, perfect. So let's say I'm going to make a plane. Okay, hold on a sec, it's really blown out, so I'm just going to turn off compositing. So I make a plane, I go in, I do some bad things. So I go cut. Okay, so now I have crazy amount of, faces or whatever. And then let's go extrude, and then extrude, and then extrude, and extrude, and rotate, and do weird things. Okay, I have this object. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go check all. It's going to say, hey, there's some bad stuff, there's some okay stuff. I'm going to go make manifold, clean up distortion. So already it's starting to fix stuff. Now, some stuff I've done, it can't fix. Some stuff I've done is just bad and dumb. The other thing I can do is I can go into edit mode, select all my vertices, right click, and go merge by distance. And what that'll do is if you have any vertices sitting on top of one another, that will get rid of those. Another thing you can do, I've done this for years when I was using Maya. If your piece of geometry has all sorts of bad stuff in it, go File, Export, OBJ. OBJ is a very old file type, and as such, it doesn't take a whole bunch of stuff with it. So if I just export the OBJ file, actually here, hold on, export, OBJ, selected only, there we go. Okay, and then I go File, Import, OBJ. What it does is it sends something out and it brings it back in, and anything that's really wonky with it, it fixes. Now, anything that's really garbled here is my fault at this point, and it's kind of on me to kind of fix that. But overall, the level of broken in the file, if I were to then in the 3D print toolkit just go check all, we've got a lot of intersecting faces still. That's on me. So I'll just go fix the distorted, make manifold, do all that stuff, and it's as clean as it can be without me being a better artist. If you are concerned about things having too many, faces or whatever, or too many sides, you have crazy amount of cuts or whatever, and you want to clean that up, what you can do is you can just select everything, all the faces, right click, and you can go triangulate faces, and then tries to quads. And what that'll attempt to do is it'll attempt to fix anything that's like more than 5-sided. If someone was targeting a role EA, would you say it's better to gain experience in Unreal or Unity or some other engine? The question is, what's publicly engine available closest to Frostbite? Honestly, if you're fluent in Unity or Unreal, you're fine. A lot of the internal game teams at EA have been given freedom to actually no longer use Frostbite. So if they're still using Frostbite, it's by choice. I did hear that the latest Dragon Age is still using Frostbite, which blew my mind. The fact that like they were given the option and they were like, yeah, we'll use Frostbite, which again, wild times. But yeah, if you don't have access to Frostbite, if you learn Unreal or Unity, it's mostly the same. They're going to have node-based material editors. They're going to have node-based graph editors. It's kind of all the same stuff. Okay, so using supporting edge loops or the bevel modifier, is one better than the other? So that depends. So let's say I have this object here, and I want to subdivide it. So I want to have more geometry. I can click on here on the modifiers, and I can go generate subdivision surface. Let's crank up the number. So it turns my cube into a sphere. I don't want a sphere. So I'm going to go back into edit mode. I'll hit tab so I can see my cube. Now, if I wanted to insert edge loops, you can see pretty quickly the effect of adding these supporting edge loops is it's going to start to retain the original shape of the object a little bit better. Okay, so I'm just going to add all these supporting edges, and what this does is it gives me a really nice high resolution cube. That's a lot of work though. Okay, if I don't want to do all that, and I just go add bevel modifier, put that in front of the subdivs, and then add 2 segments, and let's say go absolute. Okay, so it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen the other. If you have a preference, if you manually insert edge loops, you're doing more what I would call destructive editing or modeling. You're doing stuff by hand. Whereas if you're using modifiers, if at any point you don't like the modifier, you can literally just turn it off and on. You can say, okay, well, what happens if I move it later in the stack? Right? Okay, that's no good. Let's say I wanted to add something else to the stack where it's like, okay, I'm going to add a mirror modifier. I'm going to move my object over. So now I've got my mirror modifier that's got bevel, subdivision, and then the mirror. I'm going to put the mirror first, and then I'm going to do something silly like extrude this up, and then extrude this over. Okay, and then I'll turn on clipping so that it meets in the middle. Delete that face, and then if I hit exit, so now, you know, this is bridged together. It's being beveled, it's being subdivided. If I move this over here, completely changes everything. So I err on the side of using the modifier method as much as possible because I love being able to like go, you know, like turn things on and off and manipulate things and be able to go back and redo it or change it later. At some point, I'm going to have to turn it into mesh, but it's really nice to have access to these modifier tools as opposed to just directly manipulating stuff. Now, I learned how to kind of do this in Maya. It was a little bit of a workaround and a little bit of a cheat. You can do non-destructive edits in Maya, but it is a little bit more work than it is here. So it's definitely easier to do in here. The other cool thing is, let's say I'm here and I enjoy this. I'm going to hit Control A, Visual Geometry to Mesh. If anybody here has used ZBrush before, inside of Blender, you also have sculpting tools, and they're pretty rad. I'm just going to quickly just take a look. So we don't have a ton of geo here, so I'm just going to hit Control R to remesh. There we go. So let's say, you know, I've brought this in, and now I want to, here, let's turn on symmetry. So I want to sculpt on it. I want to give it some eyebrows. Okay. Right. So I can come through, I can sculpt on it, I can model with it, I can do whatever I want. jump back into layout, you know, oops, go back into the edit mode, whatever. Like, it's the sculpting is more the destructive editing, right? You're actually like manipulating stuff and doing stuff, but I digress. It's more fun. All right, is there any other questions? Is anybody playing any fun games? I'm just about to finish the new Zelda game, and it's fantastic. But it is too easy. I will say that. Hi-Fi Rush is rad, yeah. Pour one out for a fantastic studio that got nuked for no good reason. I'm still salty at Microsoft for doing the Hi-Fi Rush team dirty, but they did get their 11th hour reprieve. I can't remember if it was Nexon or who bought them. David Diver's pretty rad. And of course, I mean, you have to admit that somebody out there is playing Fortnite, because that game keeps making money hand over fist. I love that Fortnite is an ecosystem now. There are games that are being launched inside of Fortnite. The new Ninja Turtles game that came out in Fortnite. Where is it? Ninja Turtles Fortnite game. Yeah, so they like straight up just, there's a game that you play by launching it through Fortnite. Yeah, Fortnite, like, I mean, they've got concerts, there's the Lego mode, there's, you know, product launches. Like right now there's like Nikes in there that like fit on a whole bunch of your different skins, and Disney is going to have a portal in there for, like, I mean, it's basically their Disney Infinity / you know, Skylanders sort of style thing that's all going to live inside there. Hotkey for vertices. So if I jump in here, let me just quickly subdivide the crap out of this thing. So if I'm in here and I want to be editing vertices, 1 is for vertex, 2 is for edge, and 3 is for faces. If you want to select all of something, just hover over it, hit the L key. If I have, let's say, 3 materials on something, so let's go blue, green, and then red. So I'm just going to assign this loop to green, and we'll do this loop to red. So if I hit the L key now, and I just go select by material, I can grab different parts of the mesh based on materials. Yeah, the mesh is going to look weird in Unreal for sure. That looks like the wrong materials applied to it. And that looks like, so this one right here, I can show you how to fix this. That is somewhere along the line something got scaled in negative, so the normals are flipped. So for example, if I take this object and I scale it all the way down, and now it's scaled to -111. It looks fine right here, right now. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here, and I'm going to click on this little arrow and go backface culling. And so now it looks kind of funny, and that's because when it was scaled to the negative, all of the faces are now facing inside as opposed to outside. You can fix that by selecting your faces and hitting Shift-N. Okay, and that's going to invert those faces. So if you re-import that into Unreal, that will fix those inverted faces. Okay, so yeah, like, let's say I'm selecting by edge, and then I go select by material. There we go. And then I can hit Shift-H and hide everything except for that ring of materials. So the L key is definitely a game changer for being able to select specifics. So here's the kind of like the source art that I was using for our Unreal scene. All right, if anybody does have to pop out, we are now over time, so I'm gonna wrap up. If you do have any questions and you do want to get a hold of me, check your junk mail if you didn't get my email today, mike.hayes@KPU. I'll just put it in the chat. .ca. There we go. How come? Oh, hold on. Everyone in meeting. There we go. Okay. Also, like I was saying before, make sure to check in here, because if you have any like school-related stuff, you can reach out to Liam. All right, gang. That just about wraps it up for me today. Like I said, if you do have any like follow-up stuff, please feel free to reach out to either myself or Liam. And I look forward to seeing you guys again soon in some way, shape, or form. All right. Talk to you later. Have a great night, everybody.